I pulled into my driveway after another exhausting day at the marketing firm, only to find two massive moving trucks blocking my path and strangers hauling furniture through the front door of my house. My house? The three-bedroom colonial I'd secretly saved 6 years to buy. My parents Robert and Patricia were directing traffic like they owned the place, while my brother Derek's wife Amanda supervised their kids carrying boxes. My phone buzzed frantically with calls from Sarah, my girlfriend, screaming that people were changing the locks on our future home. That's when it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Walking up to my own front porch felt surreal, watching my nephew Tyler and niece Madison race around the yard, like they'd just moved into their dream house. The irony burned deep because this was supposed to be my dream house, the culmination of 28 years of watching my older brother Derek get everything handed to him, while I worked double shifts and lived in a cramped studio apartment downtown. Leon. My mother Patricia called out, wiping sweat from her forehead as she emerged from the house carrying a lamp I'd never seen before. Perfect timing. We need your help moving the couch from the truck. I stood frozen on the sidewalk watching my father Robert direct two burly movers toward the front entrance with a sectional sofa that definitely wasn't mine. The Johnsons from next door peered over their fence, clearly confused about the commotion at the house they'd seen me checking on for weeks during the closing process. What exactly is happening here? I managed to ask, my voice cracking slightly as the reality of the situation crashed over me. Derek appeared from around the moving truck, sweaty and sheepish, avoiding direct eye contact as he approached. At 32, my brother had always been the golden child, the one who got married, first had kids first, and somehow always landed on his feet, despite making questionable life choices. His family had been living with our parents for the past 2 years, after losing their rental when Derek's hours got cut at the hardware store. Leon, man, I can explain. Derek started running his hand through his thinning brown hair. Mom and Dad said you'd understand once we talked it through. Understand what exactly? I shot back my marketing coordinator salary, suddenly feeling inadequate as I calculated the mortgage payments I'd been planning to make on this house. Understand why my family is moving into the house I bought without telling me? Amanda emerged from the front door, her arms full of children's clothes, her face flushed with embarrassment. She'd always been kind to me, and seeing her caught in the middle of this mess made my stomach turn. Tyler and Madison didn't understand what was happening, but they sensed the tension and stopped their excited chatter. My father stepped forward with his characteristic authoritative stance, the same posture he'd used throughout my childhood to settle arguments. Son, sit down. We need to discuss this rationally. Rationally? I laughed bitterly, gesturing toward the circus unfolding in my driveway. Dad, I signed a mortgage 3 months ago. I have the deed in my name. This is my house. About that? My mother interjected, her voice taking on the carefully measured tone she used when delivering unwelcome news. We found your mortgage documents when we were helping clean your old apartment. A chill ran down my spine. You went through my apartment. You left your key with us for emergencies, Patricia explained matter-of-factly. When your landlord called about some maintenance issue, we went to handle it. That's when we found all the paperwork. Derek shuffled his feet uncomfortably. Look, Leon, we never asked for this. But when Mom and Dad explained the situation, it just made sense. Amanda and I have 2 kids. You're still single. Sarah's got her own place anyway. The casual dismissal of my relationship and my right to my own property hit me like a physical blow. Sarah and I had been together for 18 months, and buying this house was supposed to be the first step toward building our life together. We'd spent countless evenings driving through this neighborhood talking about which bedroom would be our office and where we'd plant a garden. Derek has a family, Leon. My father continued, his voice firm, but not unkind. 2 growing children who need stability. You're young, you've got time to find another place. This is what families do for each other. I looked around at the moving trucks, the furniture being carried inside, the neighbors watching from their windows, and felt something crack inside my chest. These people had made decisions about my life, my money, my future, without consulting me at all. Did anyone think to ask what I wanted? I asked quietly. Of course we considered your feelings, my mother replied, straightening a box labeled Tyler's room on the front steps. But sometimes family means making sacrifices. Derek and Amanda have been struggling. The kids need their own space. You'll understand when you have children of your own. Amanda approached cautiously, her voice gentle but strained. Leon, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this wasn't discussed with you first. The kids are so excited about having their own rooms again. We told them this morning that we were moving to Uncle Leon's house. The weight of disappointing two children added another layer of guilt to an already impossible situation. Tyler and Madison had been sharing a small bedroom in my parents' house, sleeping on bunk beds in a space barely large enough for their toys. Seeing them excited about having a real home again made me feel selfish for wanting my own house back. My phone rang, and Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I answered immediately. Leon, what's happening? There are people here changing the locks, and when I showed up with groceries for our celebration dinner, they told me this wasn't your house anymore. I closed my eyes, feeling the humiliation burn through my chest. Sarah had taken the afternoon off from her job at the dental office to surprise me with a romantic dinner in our new home. Instead, she'd encountered strangers who treated her like a trespasser. I'll call you back, I said quietly, hanging up before she could respond. My father reached into his jacket pocket and produced a manila envelope, his expression growing serious. Actually, son, before you make any rash decisions, we need to discuss the financial aspect of this situation. What financial aspect? I demanded, though something in his tone made my stomach drop. Robert opened the envelope and pulled out several bank statements and canceled checks. It appears you've been having some trouble keeping up with your mortgage payments. We've had to step in and make payments on your behalf. I grabbed the papers from his hands, scanning the bank statements with growing confusion and horror. 3 checks each for $1,500 had been written from my account over the past 2 months. Checks I had never written in handwriting that looked suspiciously similar to mine, but was slightly off in ways only I would notice. I never wrote these checks. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The bank has them on file, my father replied smoothly. Derek has been contributing to the mortgage to help ensure the payments were made on time. It's only fair that his family benefit from his investment. Derek's face flushed red. Dad, that's not exactly how you explained it to me. The bottom line, my mother interrupted, is that this house is being used to help the whole family. Leon, you're being selfish. Derek's children need stability, and you're young enough to start over. I stared at the forged checks in my hands, my mind racing to process the implications. My parents had somehow gained access to my bank account, forged my signature, and created a paper trail suggesting that Derek had been helping pay for my house. The violation felt so profound that I struggled to form words. The moving crew continued their work around us, carrying in boxes labeled with my nephew's and niece's names, transforming my dream home into someone else's reality while I stood helplessly on the sidewalk. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and I realized that my entire family had conspired against me in ways I was only beginning to understand. We need to talk about this privately, I finally managed to say. There's nothing private about family, my father said firmly. Derek and Amanda have a right to know what's being decided about their living situation. As I watched my nephew Tyler carry a box of his toys toward the house I'd worked 6 years to afford, I realized this was just the beginning of a nightmare I never could have imagined. The bank statements in my hands felt like evidence of a crime I was only beginning to comprehend. Inside the house that was supposed to be mine, I could hear Amanda directing the kids about where to put their belongings, their voices echoing through rooms I'd imagined Sarah and I would fill with our own conversations and laughter. Let's go inside and discuss this properly. My father suggested gesturing toward the front door like he was inviting me into his own home. Walking through my own front door behind my parents felt like entering an alternate reality. The hardwood floors I'd inspected so carefully during the home inspection were now scuffed with moving equipment. The kitchen where I'd planned to cook Sarah breakfast was filled with boxes labeled Amanda's Dishes and Derek's Coffee Maker. I sat down heavily at my own dining room table, spreading the bank statements across the surface I'd imagined hosting family dinners on. But not like this. Never like this. Leon. Derek said, settling into the chair across from me. I need you to understand something. When Mom and Dad told me about these mortgage payment issues, I thought I was helping you out. What mortgage payment issues? I demanded. Derek, I've never missed a payment. I've never even been late. My mother bustled around the kitchen unpacking dishes like she was setting up her own home. Leon, honey, your father and I have been managing family finances for 40 years. We can see when someone's getting in over their head financially. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling through 3 months of transactions. Look at this. Every mortgage payment made on time automatically deducted from my account. I set up automatic payments specifically so I'd never miss one. Derek leaned over to look at my phone screen, and I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. But Dad, you showed me statements that said Leon was behind on payments. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Son, there are aspects of mortgage management that you don't understand. Sometimes payments show up as made, but don't actually clear properly. That's not how banking works, I said flatly. Dad, these checks you're showing me are forgeries. Look at the signature. I held up one of the canceled checks next to my driver's license. The signature was close, but the L in Leon had a slightly different loop, and the N at the end was formed differently than I'd been writing my name for 28 years. Derek studied both signatures carefully. Oh my God, Dad, these don't match. Handwriting changes when you're stressed, my father said dismissively. Leon's been under a lot of pressure at work. The casual gaslighting hit me like a slap. I'd been working as a marketing coordinator at Mitchell & Associates for 4 years, and my boss, David Carter, had actually praised my recent campaign work. The pressure I'd been under was entirely financial, saving every possible dollar to afford this house. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Leon. I'm confused and worried. Please call me when you can explain what's happening. I excused myself to the backyard, stepping onto the deck I'd imagined hosting barbecues on. The yard was smaller than I'd wanted, but perfectly sized for a couple just starting out. Derek's kids were already running around claiming the swing set that came with the house. Sarah, I'm so sorry, I said when she answered. Something's happening with my family. They found out about the house and somehow convinced themselves that Derek's family should live here instead of us. What do you mean they found out Leon were supposed to celebrate tonight? I bought champagne and ingredients for that pasta dish you love. The image of Sarah shopping for our celebration while my family dismantled our future made my throat tight. Can you meet me at your apartment tonight? I need time to figure out what's happening here. Of course, she said immediately. But Leon, this is your house. You can't let them just take it. When I walked back inside, I found Derek sitting alone at the table staring at the bank statements with a troubled expression. My parents had moved to the living room where I could hear them discussing furniture placement with Amanda. Leon, Derek said quietly, I think we need to talk privately. We walked to the garage, closing the door behind us. The space was empty except for my lawnmower and some basic tools I'd bought specifically for home ownership. I want you to know I never asked for any of this. Derek began, his voice strained. When Mom and Dad told me you were having financial problems and offered to help, I thought it was temporary. Just until Amanda and I could save up for our own place. Derek, what exactly did they tell you? He rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. They said you'd confided in them about struggling with the mortgage payments, that you were too proud to ask for help directly, but that you'd agreed to let me contribute to the payments in exchange for letting my family stay here temporarily. And you believed I'd buy a house I couldn't afford and then secretly ask you to help pay for it. Derek's face reddened. Leon, you have to understand our situation. Amanda and I have been living in that tiny bedroom at Mom and Dad's house for 2 years. The kids are getting older, they need privacy. Tyler's starting to ask why we can't afford our own place. So you took mine? I thought it was a family arrangement. Derek's voice cracked. I thought you were being generous, letting us contribute and stay here while we figured out our next step. I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine distress and confusion. Derek had always been gullible when it came to our parents' schemes, but he wasn't malicious. Derek, how much money have you given them for these supposed mortgage payments? $4,500 over 2 months, he said quietly. Money Amanda and I saved from her part-time job at the daycare. Where did you get $4,500? You work part-time at the hardware store? Derek's shoulders sagged. Amanda's been working extra hours. She's been cleaning houses on weekends. We've been eating peanut butter sandwiches and ramen noodles for dinner so we could contribute to your mortgage and prove we were responsible enough to live here. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My brother's family had been starving themselves to pay money toward my house money that apparently never reached my actual mortgage company. Meanwhile, my parents had been forging checks from my account to make it look like I was behind on payments. Derek, I need to see your bank records, the withdrawals you made for these payments. He pulled out his phone and showed me his banking app. 3 withdrawals each for $1,500 made to cash on the same dates as the forged checks from my account. Who did you give this money to? Dad, he said he'd handle making the payments to your mortgage company directly. I felt sick. Derek, Dad took your cash and then wrote forged checks from my account for the same amounts. He made it look like you were contributing by stealing money from both of us. Derek stared at me in disbelief. That can't be right. Why would he do that? Before I could answer, my father appeared in the garage doorway. Boys, we need to discuss the logistics of this living arrangement. Derek, Amanda needs your help deciding where to put the children's beds. Dad. I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Derek just showed me his bank withdrawals. You took cash from him and then forged checks from my account for the same amounts. Robert's expression didn't change. Leon, you're obviously confused about the financial arrangements. Perhaps we should involve your mother in this conversation. No. Derek said suddenly, his voice stronger than I'd heard it all day. Dad, Leon's right. I gave you cash, and these checks are from his account. That doesn't make sense. Sometimes financial arrangements are complicated. My father replied smoothly. The important thing is that the mortgage payments were made and the family has housing. Derek stood up, his face flushing with anger. Dad, did you lie to me about Leon being behind on his payments? I think you boys are getting worked up over details that don't matter in the big picture, Robert said, but something in his tone had shifted. They matter to me, Derek said firmly. Amanda and I have been living on nothing so we could help Leon, and now I find out Leon never needed help in the first place. My father's carefully constructed story was beginning to crumble, but I could see him calculating his next move. As I watched him prepare to launch into another round of manipulation, my phone rang. Mr. Leon Carter. The voice was professional and unfamiliar. This is Michael Thompson from First National Mortgage. We need to discuss some irregularities with your account. I stepped away from my father and brother to take the call, but not before seeing the flash of panic that crossed Robert's face. Mr. Carter, we've discovered some unusual activity on your mortgage account. Specifically, we've received notification of a second mortgage application in your name that we never processed. We need you to come in immediately to verify your identity and account status. As Michael Thompson explained that someone had attempted to take out a $50,000 home equity loan using my information, I realized I was staring into an abyss of deception that went far deeper than forged checks and family manipulation. The next morning, I sat in the First National Mortgage Office across from Michael Thompson, a middle-aged loan officer with 20 years of experience who looked genuinely disturbed by what he was showing me. Mr. Carter, I've been in this business for 2 decades, and I've never seen a case quite like this, he said, spreading documents across his desk. Someone has been systematically using your personal information to apply for loans, credit cards, and lines of credit for the past 5 years. My hands shook as I examined the paperwork. Car loans for vehicles I'd never seen, credit card applications for accounts I'd never opened, and business loans for a company I'd never heard of called Suburban Landscape Solutions. How is this possible? How did they get my social security number, my employment information, all of this? Michael adjusted his glasses, pointing to specific sections of the applications. These applications show intimate knowledge of your financial history, your employment start date, your previous addresses, even your high school graduation year. This level of detail typically indicates family involvement. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Family involvement. I thought about my parents having access to my apartment, my mail, my personal documents over the years. The business loan is particularly concerning. Michael continued, pulling out a thick folder. Suburban Landscape Solutions received a $35,000 loan using your credit and employment as collateral. The business address is listed as your parents' home. Derek, his failed landscaping company that he'd mentioned starting 2 years ago, the same time these fraudulent applications began appearing on my credit report. Mr. Thompson, can you pull my complete credit history? Everything going back 5 years? We spent the next hour going through my credit report line by line. The scope of the fraud was staggering. 7 unauthorized credit cards with a combined limit of $42,000. 2 car loans totaling $63,000. The business loan for $35,000. And attempts at a home equity loan against my new house for $50,000. The total fraudulent debt in your name is approximately $140,000, Michael said grimly. Your credit score has dropped from 780 to 640 because of late payments and high utilization on accounts you never opened. I felt nauseated. How does this affect my mortgage? Unfortunately, your interest rate was calculated based on your credit score at the time of application. If we'd seen this credit report, you would have qualified for a significantly lower rate, or you might not have qualified for the loan amount at all. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Took the morning off work, coming to support you through whatever's happening. Mr. Thompson, what are my legal options here? This is felony identity theft and fraud. You need to file a police report immediately and contact an attorney who specializes in financial crimes. You'll also need to dispute each fraudulent account individually with the credit bureaus. I drove home, my mind reeling with the implications. When I arrived at my parents' house, Derek's truck was in the driveway, but Amanda's SUV was gone. Sarah's car was parked across the street, and she was sitting on the front steps waiting for me. Leon, she said, standing up as I approached. I've been doing some research on property law and fraud. We need to talk. We walked to the backyard where we could speak privately. Sarah had always been methodical and thorough qualities that made her an excellent dental hygienist and had apparently translated well to legal research. I spent all night reading about identity theft and property fraud, she said, pulling out a notebook covered in her neat handwriting. If your parents have been using your information for loans and applications, this goes way beyond family disputes. This is criminal. I just came from the mortgage company. The fraud is worse than I thought. I explained everything Michael Thompson had shown me, watching Sarah's expression grow increasingly serious. Leon, we need to call the police right now, she said firmly. And we need to document everything before your parents have a chance to destroy evidence. But Derek and Amanda are living in my house with their kids. If I call the police, this destroys the whole family. Sarah took my hands in hers, her voice gentle but firm. Leon, they've stolen over $100,000 from you. They've damaged your credit, compromised your ability to buy a home, and potentially put your job at risk. This isn't about family loyalty anymore. This is about protecting yourself from criminals. The word criminals felt surreal when applied to my parents, but the evidence was undeniable. Before I could respond, Derek emerged from the house looking haggard and confused. "Leon, I need to talk to you," he said, approaching hesitantly. "Amanda left this morning. She took the kids and went to stay with her sister in Columbus." "Why?" Derek sat down heavily on the picnic table bench. "She found some paperwork in our stuff. Leon, I think Mom and Dad have been lying to both of us for a lot longer than we realized." He pulled out a manila folder filled with documents. These were in a box labeled Derek's Business Papers. I thought it was just old stuff from my landscaping company, but Amanda looked through it this morning. The first document was a business license for Suburban Landscape Solutions filed with Derek listed as owner, but with my social security number instead of his. "Derek, did you ever see this paperwork when you started your business?" "No," he said quietly. "Dad handled all the paperwork. He said business licensing was complicated and he'd take care of the administrative stuff so I could focus on getting customers." The next document was even worse. A loan application for Derek's landscaping truck using my employment information and credit score, but with Derek's name as the primary borrower. "Derek, this truck loan shows up on my credit report as one of the fraudulent accounts." Derek's face went white. "Leon, I swear I didn't know. Dad co-signed for the truck and I've been making the payments directly to him. I thought he was helping me build credit by being a co-signer." "You've been making payments to Dad, not to the loan company?" "Every month, $285 cash directly to Dad. He said it was easier than dealing with the financing company directly." Sarah and I exchanged glances. "Derek, pull out your bank records. Show me the cash withdrawals." Over the next 20 minutes, Derek showed us a pattern of cash withdrawals going back 2 years. Monthly truck payments, insurance payments for both vehicles, business license renewals, equipment purchases. Every transaction had been made in cash directly to our father. "Derek," Sarah said gently, "all of these loans and accounts are in Leon's name, not yours. Your father has been using Leon's identity to get financing for your life and then collecting payments from you in cash." Derek stared at the papers spread across the picnic table, his hands shaking. "But why would he do this?" "Control." I said, the pieces finally clicking together. "Derek, think about it. As long as you're financially dependent and don't have credit in your own name, you can't leave. You can't get your own place, your own loans, your own life. You have to keep living with Mom and Dad and paying them cash for everything." And me, I continued, my voice growing stronger. "As long as my credit is destroyed and I'm dealing with fraudulent debt, I can't afford to move far away or become too independent either." Derek looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Leon, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." "I know you didn't," I said, surprised by my own certainty. "Derek, you're a victim here too. They've been manipulating both of us." Sarah pulled out her phone. "Leon, we need to call the police now. And Derek, you need to decide if you're going to support Leon or protect your parents." As Derek stared at the evidence of years of manipulation and fraud, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my workplace number. "Leon, this is David Carter," my boss said when I answered. "We need to talk. There's been an irregularity in your security clearance background check. Can you come in immediately?" I closed my eyes, realizing that my parents' financial fraud was now threatening my career. As I hung up the phone, I saw Derek gathering up all the fraudulent paperwork. "Leon," he said firmly, "I'm driving to the police station with you. Whatever happens, I'm going to tell them exactly what Mom and Dad did to both of us." But as we prepared to leave, my mother's car pulled into the driveway. Patricia stepped out, followed by a man in an expensive suit who I'd never seen before. "Boys," my mother called out cheerfully, "there's someone we need you to meet. This is our attorney, Marcus Webb. We need to discuss your grandfather's estate." Marcus Webb looked like the kind of attorney you'd see in a corporate law firm commercial, with perfectly styled silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. But something about his smile put me on edge immediately. "Leon Derrick," my mother said warmly, as if we were gathering for a pleasant family meeting instead of confronting evidence of identity theft and fraud. "Marcus has some wonderful news about your grandfather's estate that we need to discuss." My grandfather had died 3 years ago, leaving behind memories of a man who'd worked as a mechanic for 40 years and lived modestly in a small house on the outskirts of town. I'd been told his estate was minimal, mostly sentimental items, and a small amount that had gone toward my college loans. "Mrs. Carter asked me to review your grandfather's will because there were some questions about asset distribution," Marcus said, setting a leather briefcase on the picnic table. "It appears there may have been some misunderstandings about the inheritance amounts." Derek and Sarah flanked me as Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out legal documents. My parents remained standing, but something in their posture seemed defensive rather than excited about good news. "According to the original will," Marcus continued, "your grandfather left a substantial inheritance specifically designated for Leon's future home purchase. The amount was $85,000, placed in a trust that was to be released when Leon reached the age of 25 or purchased his first home, whichever came first." The number hit me like a physical blow. $85,000. I'd turned 25 3 years ago, around the time I'd started seriously saving for a house. "That's impossible," I said slowly. "I was told grandfather's estate was only about $20,000 and that it went toward paying off my college loans." Marcus glanced at my parents before continuing. "The trust was administered by your parents as executors of the estate. According to these records, the money was released and used for educational expenses as specified in Leon's best interest." "But I never received any money for education," I said. "I paid off my college loans myself, working 2 jobs through school." Derek had gone very quiet beside me, and when I looked at him, his face was pale. "Derek," I said carefully, "when did you and Amanda move out of your rental house?" 3 years ago," he whispered. "Right after Grandpa died. We couldn't afford the rent increase, so we moved in with Mom and Dad temporarily." "And when did you put the down payment on the mobile home you lived in before that?" Derek's voice was barely audible. 3 years ago. We used some money Mom and Dad gave us to help with housing costs during a difficult time." Sarah grabbed my arm. "Leon asked him how much money they gave him." $15,000. Derek said, not meeting my eyes. "They said it was an early inheritance, something Grandpa had wanted the family to have." I felt like I was falling down a well with no bottom. "Derek, Grandpa's inheritance was supposed to be for my first home. They gave you $15,000 of my money and told you it was your inheritance." Marcus Webb shuffled through his papers uncomfortably. "There may have been some misunderstanding about the distribution requirements." What's the current balance in the trust?" Sarah asked directly. Marcus hesitated. "According to the most recent statements, approximately $12,000 remains." $12,000. I stood up abruptly. "Where's the other $73,000? My mother stepped forward, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when explaining complicated adult matters. "Leon, honey, the money was used for family needs during difficult times. Derek's housing, Amanda's medical expenses when Madison was sick, emergency repairs on the family business. It was all used to help the family. It wasn't family money," I said, my voice rising. "It was specifically left to me for buying a house." "And you got a house?" my father interjected. "The house Derek's family is living in now. It all worked out." The circular logic was maddening. They'd stolen my inheritance money, given portions to Derek for housing, used the rest for other purposes, and then claimed I should be grateful that Derek's family was living in the house I'd bought with my own saved money. Derek stood up slowly, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Mom, Dad, you told me that money was my inheritance. You watched me struggle to pay rent, Watched Amanda work extra jobs, and the whole time you were giving me Leon's money and lying about where it came from. Derek, you needed help, Patricia said defensively. Leon was young and single. Family money should go where it's needed most. But it wasn't family money, Derek's voice cracked. It was Leon's money, and I never would have taken it if I'd known. Marcus Webb cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should discuss the legal remedies available for resolving these estate distribution questions. What legal remedies? I asked. Well, there are options for challenging the executor's distribution decisions if there's evidence of mismanagement or self-dealing. Sarah had been taking notes throughout the conversation. Mr. Webb, who hired you to review this estate? Leon's parents contacted me when questions arose about the inheritance distribution. What questions? Leon didn't even know there was money missing until today. Marcus Webb's composure slipped slightly. There were some irregularities that needed to be clarified. What kind of irregularities? I pressed. Before Marcus could answer, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Leon Carter. This is Carol Bennett from Bennett & Associates. I was your grandfather's estate attorney. I need to speak with you immediately about some very serious concerns regarding your inheritance. I stepped away to take the call, my heart pounding. Mr. Carter, I've been contacted by the probate court about irregularities in your grandfather's estate. Specifically, I've discovered that documents were filed claiming you had requested early distribution of your inheritance for educational expenses. But those documents contain a signature that doesn't match any of your official signatures on file. Are you saying the documents were forged? That's exactly what I'm saying. Mr. Carter, someone forged your signature to authorize the early release of $85,000 from your grandfather's trust. This is a serious crime. When I returned to the group, Marcus Webb was packing up his briefcase quickly. I think we've covered everything we need to discuss today, he said, avoiding eye contact. The family can work out the details privately. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. We're not going to work this out privately. Mr. Webb, I just spoke with my grandfather's actual estate attorney. She says documents authorizing the early distribution of my inheritance contain forged signatures. Marcus Webb's face went white. I think there's been some confusion. Perhaps we should schedule a follow-up meeting when everyone has had time to review the paperwork. There's no confusion, Sarah said firmly. Leon's parents stole $85,000 from his inheritance using forged documents. That's felony theft and fraud. Derek looked at our parents with an expression I'd never seen before. You made me complicit in stealing from my own brother. You let me take his money and feel grateful for it while he worked double shifts to save for a house. Derek, you're being dramatic, my father said, but his usual commanding tone had weakened. I'm being honest for the first time in 3 years, Derek shot back. Leon, I'm going to pay back every penny they gave me, even if it takes the rest of my life. Derek, you can't pay back money you never knew was stolen, I said. But Mom and Dad can explain to a judge how they forged legal documents to steal from their own son. As I watched Marcus Webb hurry toward his car, clearly wanting to distance himself from what was obviously a criminal conspiracy, my phone rang again. Leon, this is Detective Thomas Reed with the Financial Crimes Unit. We've received a complaint about identity theft and inheritance fraud. We need to schedule an interview with you as soon as possible. Carol Bennett had apparently contacted law enforcement immediately after discovering the forged documents. As I scheduled the interview with Detective Reed, I realized that my parents' crimes were already under official investigation. But even as legal consequences began closing in around them, I could see my father calculating his next move, preparing for one final desperate attempt to maintain control over the situation he'd created. Detective Thomas Reed looked like he'd spent 20 years investigating white-collar crime with tired eyes, and the methodical manner of someone who'd seen every type of financial deception imaginable. We sat in his sparse office at the downtown police station while he reviewed the evidence Sarah and I had compiled over the past week. Mr. Carter, I've been investigating financial fraud for 18 years, and what you're describing is one of the most systematic family fraud cases I've encountered, Detective Reed said, spreading documents across his desk. Your parents didn't just steal your inheritance and forge a few signatures. They've been running what amounts to a criminal enterprise. The evidence was overwhelming. Beyond the forged inheritance documents and identity theft, Detective Reed's investigation had uncovered a web of financial crimes that stretched back 7 years. Your parents have been using your personal information to establish credit accounts, business licenses, and loan applications for multiple family members, Reed continued. Your cousin Jennifer in Toledo, your Uncle Frank's business license renewal, even your grandmother's reverse mortgage application. They've been forging signatures and using family members' information without consent for years. Sarah squeezed my hand as Detective Reed pulled out a thick folder labeled Carter Family Financial Crimes. The mobile home Derek's family lived in. That's still in foreclosure proceedings with your name on the mortgage. The landscaping business. They used your information to secure supplier credit equipment loans, even business insurance. Your parents have made you financially liable for approximately $230,000 in debt across multiple accounts and properties. My phone buzzed with a call from my workplace. I'd been dreading this conversation since my boss, David Carter, had called earlier about my security clearance issues. Leon, we need to discuss some serious concerns, David said when I answered. The background check for your security clearance renewal has revealed significant financial irregularities. Credit accounts, you didn't disclose debt levels that exceed what you reported, and some red flags about potential criminal activity. David, I'm sitting with a detective right now. I'm the victim of identity theft and fraud committed by my own family. I'm filing charges today. Jesus, Leon, are you saying you didn't know about these accounts? I found out a week ago. My parents have been using my information for fraudulent loans and credit applications for years. David was quiet for a long moment. Leon, this actually explains some things. Your work performance has been excellent, but these financial red flags didn't match your character at all. Can you have the detective send me a copy of the police report? I'll submit it to the security office. When I hung up, Detective Reed was reviewing bank records from Derek's accounts. Your brother has been making cash payments to your parents for vehicle loans, insurance, and business expenses that were all obtained using your credit and personal information, Reed said. But here's what's interesting. Derek's payments to your parents total about $67,000 over the past 2 years, but the actual payments made to legitimate creditors total only $32,000. Where's the other $35,000? Sarah asked. That's what I intend to find out, Reed replied. But based on the pattern of cash transactions and the timing, I suspect your parents have been pocketing the difference. Derek had voluntarily come to the police station to provide his bank records and testimony. He sat in the waiting area outside Reed's office, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. Detective Reed, I said my brother genuinely didn't know about the fraud. He thought our parents were helping him establish credit legitimately. I believe that, Reed said. Derek's testimony is actually crucial for proving that your parents deliberately deceived family members to perpetrate fraud. He's a witness, not a suspect. Reed's phone rang and he answered with a grim expression. The conversation was brief, but I could see him taking notes and asking for addresses. Mr. Carter, we have a problem. Your parents have apparently hired an attorney to challenge your mental competence. They're claiming that your recent behavior changes and erratic financial decisions indicate mental instability that requires family intervention. The audacity was breathtaking. After stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars using my identity, they were now claiming I was mentally incompetent and needed their protection. Can they do that? Sarah asked. They can try, Reed said grimly. But they've made a critical mistake. The attorney they hired, Marcus Webb, is currently under investigation by the state bar for ethics violations. He's been involved in several questionable competency cases involving inheritance disputes. My phone rang with an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice spoke urgently. "Is this Leon Carter? You don't know me, but my name is Jennifer Sullivan. I'm Derek's cousin. I think your parents have been stealing from my family too." Jennifer explained that she'd heard about our situation through family gossip and realized that her own financial problems over the past few years might be connected to similar fraud. 2 years ago, I started getting bills for credit cards I never opened and loan payments for a car I never bought, Jennifer said. When I investigated, I found out someone had used my personal information for multiple applications. The applications were submitted with documentation that could only have come from family members who had access to my social security number and employment information. Detective Reed gestured for me to put the call on speaker. "Ms. Sullivan, this is Detective Reed with Financial Crimes. Can you come to the station today to provide a statement?" Within 2 hours, Jennifer was sitting in Detective Reed's office with her own folder of evidence. Credit cards, car loans, even a business license for a cleaning company she'd never started. All using her information, all with forged signatures, all connected to addresses and phone numbers associated with my parents. "This is bigger than family financial abuse," Reed said, as he reviewed Jennifer's evidence. "Your parents have been running an identity theft operation targeting multiple family members. This is organized crime." Derek joined us in Reed's office, his face pale as he processed the scope of his parents' criminal activity. "How many other family members might be involved?" Reed asked. Derek thought for a moment. "Uncle Frank had some business license issues last year. Aunt Linda mentioned problems with her credit score. My grandmother had some confusion about mortgage payments on her house." "We need to contact all of them," Reed said. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be honest with you. Based on the scope of this investigation, your parents are looking at serious felony charges. Federal charges, potentially, if the mail fraud and interstate aspects hold up." As Detective Reed explained the potential charges ranging from identity theft to elder abuse, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. "Son, we need to meet tonight. Just family. There are some things about your grandfather's estate that we need to discuss privately before any more misunderstandings get out of hand. Dad, I'm at the police station filing charges for identity theft and fraud. Leon, you're making a terrible mistake. Family problems should be handled within the family. Once you involve law enforcement, there's no going back." "There's no going back anyway, Dad. You've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars and destroyed my credit. You've made Derek complicit in fraud without his knowledge. You've been running a criminal enterprise for years." "We'll see about that," my father said, his tone shifting to something cold and threatening. "Marcus Webb has already filed the competency petition. You have a hearing scheduled for next week." As my father hung up, Detective Reed was already on his phone with the district attorney's office. "We need to move fast," Reed told me after he finished his call. "If they succeed in having you declared incompetent, it could complicate the criminal prosecution. We're going to execute search warrants on your parents' home and business today." But even as law enforcement mobilized to stop my parents' criminal enterprise, I realized they had one more devastating card to play. The competency hearing wasn't just about control over my finances. It was about destroying my credibility as a witness and transferring my assets to Derek's name before the criminal investigation could freeze their accounts. The call came at 6 in the morning from a number I didn't recognize, waking me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. "Leon, this is Kelly Morrison. I used to work at Mitchell & Associates before I transferred to the downtown branch. I heard about what's happening with your family, and there's something you need to know immediately." Kelly had been a project coordinator at my firm for 2 years before taking a position with a different marketing company downtown. We'd worked together on several campaigns and had maintained a friendly professional relationship. "Kelly, what's going on?" "Leon, I'm friends with Sarah Patterson, who works as a paralegal at Webb & Associates. She called me last night because she recognized your name on some documents that came through her office. My blood turned to ice. What kind of documents? Competency hearing paperwork, but it's worse than you think. They've been building a case against you for months. Sarah found files with surveillance photos, witness statements from people claiming you've been acting erratically, and medical records that she swears look fabricated. I was fully awake now, my mind racing through the implications. Kelly, can you meet me somewhere private? I need to see whatever information Sarah has. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from both my family and my workplace. Sarah agreed to come with me, and Derek insisted on joining us after I told him about the call. Kelly arrived with Sarah Patterson, a woman in her 30s, with the careful demeanor of someone handling sensitive legal information. She placed a manila envelope on our table and looked around nervously. I want to be clear that I could lose my job for this, Sarah Patterson said quietly. But what I found in these files is criminal, and I can't stay silent. The documents she showed us were terrifying in their calculated cruelty. Photos of me talking on my phone outside my apartment, captioned as "Subject appears agitated and paranoid." Witness statements from neighbors claiming I'd been acting strangely, asking odd questions about my mail and my family. Medical records from a therapist I'd never seen documenting sessions for stress and anxiety related to financial irresponsibility. I never saw this therapist, I said, studying the forged records. Dr. Elizabeth Harper. I've never heard this name in my life. Derek examined the photos, his expression growing angry. These are all taken outside Mom and Dad's house. Look at the backgrounds. They've been watching you and taking pictures every time you visited. The most disturbing document was a psychological evaluation recommending immediate intervention for what it called financial delusions and erratic decision-making patterns consistent with early-stage psychological breakdown. Sarah, I said to the paralegal, is Marcus Webb's firm actually planning to file this in court? The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, she said grimly. And Leon, there's something else. I found correspondence between Marcus Webb and your parents going back 6 months. They've been planning this competency action since before you even bought your house. Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. They knew Leon was saving for a house. They've been planning to steal it from him for months. It gets worse, Sarah Patterson continued. The competency petition includes a request for emergency conservatorship, which would give your parents immediate control over all your assets, including your house, your bank accounts, and your employment decisions. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Leon, we've scheduled a family meeting for tonight at 7. Your cooperation with this process will determine how difficult things become for everyone involved. The implicit threat was clear. If I didn't cooperate with their competency scheme, they would make things worse for Derek, for Amanda, and the kids, for anyone who supported me. Kelly, Sarah. I said, would you both be willing to testify about these forged documents if this goes to court? They exchanged glances before Kelly nodded. Leon, I've known you for 4 years. You're one of the most financially responsible and mentally stable people I've ever worked with. These documents are obvious fabrications. Derek returned to the table, his face set with determination. Leon, I'm going to that family meeting tonight. I'm going to record the conversation, and I'm going to get them to admit what they've been doing. Derek, that's too dangerous. If they realize you're recording them... I don't care, Derek said firmly. My wife left me, my kids are confused and scared, and my entire life has been built on lies and stolen money. I'm done protecting people who have been destroying my family. We spent the afternoon preparing for the confrontation. Sarah Patterson provided copies of all the forged documents she'd found. Detective Reed agreed to monitor Derek's recording equipment and coordinate with backup officers if things went wrong. At 6:30, Derek and I drove to our parents' house together. The mobile home that Derek's family had lived in before was visible in the backyard, now sitting empty and deteriorating while still in foreclosure proceedings under my name. Our parents were waiting in the living room with Marcus Webb and another man I didn't recognize. Leon Derek. Our father said formally, This is Dr. Richard Hayes, a psychiatric professional who will be evaluating Leon's mental state for the competency hearing. The fake psychiatrist looked nervous and kept glancing at Marcus Webb as if seeking guidance. I realized they'd hired actors to play roles in their fraudulent competency case. "Dr. Hayes," I said calmly, "what's your medical license number? I'd like to verify your credentials before we begin any evaluation." The man's face flushed red. "I don't think that's necessary for this informal consultation." "Actually, it is necessary," Derek said, pulling out his phone, "because impersonating a medical professional is a felony." Our parents' carefully orchestrated plan began falling apart immediately. Marcus Webb tried to regain control of the situation, but Derek activated his recording app and began asking direct questions about the forged documents and fabricated evidence. "Mom, Dad," Derek said clearly for the recording, "did you hire people to take surveillance photos of Leon and create fake medical records?" "Derek, you don't understand the complexity of this situation," our mother began. "I understand that you've been lying to me for years," Derek interrupted. "I understand that you stole Leon's inheritance money and used it for your own purposes. I understand that you've been using both of our identities for fraudulent loans and credit applications." Our father's temper finally snapped. "You boys are being manipulated by outside influences. Your loyalty should be to family, not to some detective who wants to destroy us." "Our loyalty is to the truth," I said. "And the truth is that you've been running a criminal enterprise for years, targeting your own children and extended family members." Marcus Webb stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over. Richard, we're leaving." But as they rushed toward the door, Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reed. "Search warrants executed. Arrests imminent. Stay safe." Through the front window, we could see police cars pulling into the driveway, their red and blue lights casting eerie patterns across the walls of the house where I'd grown up. The competency hearing that never happened was scheduled for 9 in the morning. But by 8:30, Marcus Webb was in handcuffs facing charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and legal malpractice. The fake psychiatrist they'd hired turned out to be Richard Hayes, a former insurance adjuster with no medical training who'd been paid $5,000 to impersonate a mental health professional. I sat in the courtroom watching Judge Margaret Thompson review the evidence Detective Reed had compiled over the past 2 weeks. The scope of my parents' financial crimes filled 3 large boxes of documents: forged signatures, fraudulent loan applications, identity theft, targeting 6 different family members, and a systematic scheme to steal inheritance money from multiple estates. "Mr. Carter," Judge Thompson said, addressing me directly, "the court has reviewed the competency petition filed against you, and based on the evidence of fraud and fabricated documentation, this petition is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering a criminal investigation into the filing of these fraudulent court documents." Derek sat beside me holding Amanda's hand. She'd returned from Columbus with Tyler and Madison after Derek called to explain everything that had happened. The children didn't fully understand why their grandparents were in trouble, but they sensed that their family was finally moving towards something more honest and stable. "Your Honor," Detective Reed said when called to testify, "the investigation has recovered approximately $187,000 in fraudulent debt obligations that were created using Mr. Carter's identity. We've also identified $63,000 in cash payments that were collected from family members but never forwarded to legitimate creditors." My mother sat in the defendant's chair looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, while my father maintained his defiant posture, even as the evidence mounted against them. Marcus Webb had already pled guilty to multiple charges in exchange for testifying about the competency scheme and the fraudulent legal documents. The defendant, Robert Carter, faces 18 felony charges, including identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and elder abuse, the prosecutor announced. Patricia Carter faces 12 felony charges for her role in the conspiracy. Both defendants have declined plea negotiations. Carol Bennett, my grandfather's estate attorney, testified about the forged documents used to steal my inheritance money. The signature analysis clearly shows that Leon Carter never authorized the early distribution of his inheritance funds. The documents were fabricated to legitimize theft of $85,000 that was specifically designated for his home purchase. After 3 hours of testimony, Judge Thompson delivered her ruling. Robert Carter, you are sentenced to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. Patricia Carter, you are sentenced to 2 years in state prison with the possibility of early release after 18 months, followed by 5 years of probation. Both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims totaling $212,000. My parents would also face federal charges for mail fraud and interstate wire fraud, potentially adding more prison time to their sentences. The house they'd lived in for 20 years would be sold to help pay restitution to me. Derek, Jennifer, Uncle Frank, and the other family members, they defrauded. Outside the courthouse, Derek and I stood together in the October sunshine, both of us struggling to process everything that had happened. Leon, Derek said quietly, I know I can never make up for what happened, even though I didn't know about the fraud, but I want you to know that Amanda and I are moving out of your house this weekend. We found a rental we can afford with the legitimate income from my new job. Derek had been hired as a supervisor at a landscaping company, owned by someone who'd heard about our family's situation and respected Derek for standing up to our parents. It was honest work with room for advancement, and Derek was determined to build a legitimate career without relying on fraudulent credit or family manipulation. Derek, you don't have to move out immediately. Take time to find the right place for your family. No, Derek said firmly. That house represents your dreams and your hard work. Amanda and I want to build our own life on our own terms. We're done living off money that belongs to other people. Amanda approached with Tyler and Madison, both children, looking curious, but not distressed about the day's events. Leon, me unmarried? Amanda said, I want to apologize for everything. When Derek explained what really happened, I felt sick thinking about how we'd been living in your house and spending your money without knowing it. Amanda, you were victims too. You were working extra jobs and skipping meals to make payments to my parents, not knowing they were pocketing the money instead of making legitimate payments. Tyler, now 9 years old, looked up at me with Derek's eyes. Uncle Leon, are you still going to live in the house with Aunt Sarah? Yes, Tyler. Aunt Sarah and I are getting married next spring, and we're going to make that house into our family home. Madison grinned. Can we come visit and see your garden? Anytime you want, I said, ruffling her hair. In fact, I'm going to need some expert consultants to help me figure out what to plant. Sarah emerged from the courthouse, having finished her conversation with Detective Reed about the final evidence processing. The investigation had become a model case for prosecuting family financial fraud, and several other jurisdictions had requested copies of the procedures Reed had developed for investigating these types of crimes. How do you feel? Sarah asked, taking my hand. Relieved, sad, grateful, exhausted. I thought for a moment. But mostly I feel free. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have to worry about my parents manipulating my finances or controlling my decisions. Derek's landscaping business had been legally separated from all the fraudulent accounts, and he was building legitimate credit in his own name. Uncle Frank and Aunt Linda had become genuine family supporters, helping Derek and Amanda understand financial planning and budgeting without manipulation or control. Jennifer had recovered most of her stolen money through the restitution order and insurance claims. She'd also started a support group for family fraud victims, helping other people recognize the warning signs of financial abuse by relatives. My credit score had been restored to 790 after all the fraudulent accounts were removed from my report. My security clearance at work was renewed without any issues, and my boss, David Carter, had actually praised me for my integrity in handling such a difficult family situation. 6 months later, Sarah and I hosted our first legitimate family gathering in our home. Derek and Amanda brought their kids for a barbecue in the backyard I'd dreamed about for so many years. Uncle Frank and Aunt Linda came with photo albums of my grandfather sharing stories about his hopes for my future that my parents had tried to steal. "You know what Grandpa would have loved most about this," Aunt Linda said, watching Tyler and Madison play on the swing set while Derek flipped burgers on the grill I'd bought with my own money. "What's that?" "Seeing his family together again, but this time built on honesty instead of manipulation and control." Derek had paid back every dollar of my inheritance money that my parents had given him, even though I'd told him it wasn't necessary. He insisted on making monthly payments until the debt was cleared, saying it was important for his own self-respect and integrity. The scholarship fund I'd established in my grandfather's memory had already helped 12 young people learn financial literacy skills and understand their rights regarding inheritance and family financial planning. The fund was supported by donations from community members who'd followed our case and wanted to help prevent similar family fraud situations. Marcus Webb had lost his law license permanently and was serving 18 months in prison for his role in the competency fraud scheme. His conviction had led to investigations of several other questionable competency cases he'd handled, resulting in justice for multiple families who'd been victimized by similar schemes. Standing in my kitchen that evening, watching Sarah organize photos from our engagement party, while Derek helped Tyler with homework at the dining room table, and Amanda read bedtime stories to Madison in the living room, I realized something profound had changed in our family dynamics. For the first time in my life, every relationship was based on choice rather than obligation, honesty rather than manipulation, and genuine love rather than financial control. Derek and I had become real brothers, supporting each other's independence instead of competing for parental approval. Amanda had become a true sister-in-law, someone I respected for her strength in protecting her children and rebuilding her marriage on honest foundations. My grandfather's true legacy wasn't the money my parents had stolen, but the lesson he'd tried to teach me about standing up for myself and protecting what I'd worked for. He would have been proud to see me find the courage to expose the truth, even when it meant sending my own parents to prison. The house felt different now, filled with the sounds of genuine family life, instead of the tension and manipulation that had characterized my childhood. When Tyler asked me to help him with a school project about family values, I realized I finally had honest answers to give him. "Uncle Leon Alinghiwa," Tyler said as we worked on his poster about trust and honesty, "why did Grandma and Grandpa do bad things to you and Dad?" It was a difficult question that Amanda and Derek had prepared me to answer age-appropriately. Sometimes adults make very bad choices because they're scared or they want to control things they can't control, I said carefully. But when people do wrong things, even family members, it's important to tell the truth and get help from people who can make things right. Like the police and the judge. Exactly. And like family members who love you enough to tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Tyler nodded seriously. "I'm glad you and Dad told the truth. Now we can trust each other." That night, after Derek's family had gone home to their rental house and Sarah had fallen asleep beside me, I lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought us to this point. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed the strength of relationships built on genuine respect and honesty. Derek and I talked every week now, not because we were obligated to maintain family relationships, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company and respected the people we'd become through this difficult experience. Amanda had become one of Sarah's closest friends, bonded by their shared experience of rebuilding family relationships on healthier foundations. My parents would be eligible for parole in 2 years, but neither Derek nor I planned to resume contact with them unless they demonstrated genuine remorse and understanding of the damage they'd caused. We'd learned that family loyalty doesn't require accepting abuse or enabling destructive behavior. The financial recovery had been almost complete. Between the restitution payments, insurance claims, and the sale of my parents' house, I'd recovered 96% of the money they'd stolen. More importantly, I'd recovered my sense of self-worth and my ability to trust my own judgment about relationships and financial decisions. Sarah and I were planning our wedding for the following spring, with Derek serving as my best man and Amanda as one of Sarah's bridesmaids. Tyler and Madison would be our ring bearer and flower girl roles they were taking very seriously as they helped plan the ceremony. The guest list would include Uncle Frank and Aunt Linda Jennifer, and her family Detective Reed and his wife Carol Bennett, and several co-workers who'd supported me through the investigation. It would be a celebration of chosen family people who'd earned their place in our lives through loyalty, honesty, and genuine care for our well-being. 1 year after discovering the fraud, I received a letter from a law student who'd studied our case as part of a class on family financial crimes. She thanked me for having the courage to prosecute, explaining that our case had helped change state laws to provide better protection for family fraud victims and more severe penalties for relatives who commit identity theft. The letter reminded me that personal justice sometimes serves a larger purpose. By refusing to keep my parents' crimes secret to preserve family peace, Derek and I had helped protect other families from similar victimization. As I finish sharing this story, I want to leave you with the most important lesson I learned. Family relationships should make your life better, not worse. If family members are stealing from you, manipulating your finances, or demanding loyalty to cover up their crimes, that's not love, it's abuse. Trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right about family financial arrangements. Protect your personal information even from relatives. And remember that choosing honesty over family secrets takes courage, but it's the only way to build relationships based on genuine respect and love. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How did you handle a situation where family members violated your trust or took advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help other people who might be dealing with family financial abuse. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building stronger relationships. And share this with someone who might need to hear that they have the right to protect themselves even from family members who claim to love them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that your financial security and personal boundaries are worth protecting no matter who tries to violate them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their destructive behavior and insist on honesty and accountability. The house Derek and I both learned to call home is now filled with laughter, truth, and the kind of family relationships our grandfather would have been proud to see. That's the inheritance that really matters.